but the ones who focus on serving the customer and putting the customer first and just doing amazing marketing work for the customer, there's always this view of like, oh, well, if I had all that time and money and resources, I'd be doing that too. But we can't give things away for free. That's always the mentality, especially of smaller businesses, that I can't, what's the point of helping them? I can't directly relate that to ROI. Well, now everybody's in the business of helping, right? That's an essential now. You can't not be helping. You can't not have empathy.
Welcome to the Winning E-Commerce Experience Show. And now your host, Shahram Anver.
Hey guys, our guest today is the Director of SEO at Trinity. They've been helping e-commerce clients since 2006. A lot of experience there. Jessica Lister, so great to have you with us.
Hey, I am super excited to be here.
So
I've been just waiting to dive in and talk about all of these types of topics.
I know but just before we even get into that, we were just talking about how it's a Friday and how, does the concept of the weekend still exist? Are people still thinking about it that way? Because it seems like every day is a weekend, right?
Every day is the weekend. Every day is the week. Yeah, you were talking about working on the weekends. That's just been so much more fluid for my husband and I, because you're just around your workplace all day, so you might as well do some work while you're there on a Saturday or a Sunday. It's kind of crazy.
It's I know for the people like my friends with kids, it seems to be an even harder issue because they don't get it at all. There's no way you can we've got a 1.5-year-old, and there's no way you can explain to that this is an unprecedented situation, right? It's I guess it's home and work just really clashing right now.
So clashing right now. Yeah, actually, that goes into another thing. I mean, it's going to be so interesting to see the effect that this has in the long term on families, because I'm thinking about I'm in the same space. I don't have any kids, so I'm yes, this is clearly easier for me than for a lot of people. For example, our company was doing some surveys and getting some feedback on how working from home has been, because some departments had a lot more experience with it than others, and the responses were more difficult to gauge because we realized some people were thinking about it right now it sucks because I have these kids running around me and I have to take care of them in addition to work, where others were like, it'll be great eventually when the kids aren't here.
Yeah, and people are talking about how they've got more time now because they don't have to commute. I mean, it just seems like, just like what you said, everyone's having very different problems. I think in the space that we're in, e-commerce and any kind of digital work, we're basically privileged enough to be able to do our work from a computer.
Yeah.
And then you've got a whole bunch of segment of the population that can't. And then, you've got people with kids. And even when you're bringing it down to this e-commerce side, we were talking about this a little while ago, you can't really say how's e-commerce doing because every client, depending on the industry, is just doing wildly different from the other, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are doing wildly different. I'm interested in what you just said, though, that everybody has such different problems, because I see it as the opposite.
Really? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I think right now, I'm thinking about how different the approach is between marketers and consumers. There's always been this divide, this us versus them sort of mentality when you talk about your audience. And right now, I think that's so blurring because now more than ever, we're all having the same types of experiences. Our day-to-days, sure, it's very different between us sitting at home and working on our computers versus somebody who's, actually at a hospital right now, for example. But we're all still dealing with the same external circumstances, and it's so weighty in our day-to-day. It takes up so much time and effort that I think the relationship between marketers and consumers is changing, and so I don't know how long that'll last for. But
so you're basically getting at the point that marketers are now better able to empathize with the consumer because they're kind of in the same
1,000%.
situation.
1,000%. Yeah, because they need the same solutions. Exactly.
Right.
Yep. And
right.
I think this idea of empathy has always been a nice to have. Have you ever noticed that? It's like the companies that do well and the ones who are able to create value online especially, but the ones who focus on serving the customer and putting the customer first and just doing amazing marketing work for the customer, there's always this view of like, oh, well, if I had all that time and money and resources, I'd be doing that too, but we can't give things away for free. That's always the mentality, especially of smaller businesses, that I can't, what's the point of helping them? I can't directly relate that to ROI. Well, now everybody's in the business of helping, right? That's an essential now. You can't not be helping. You can't not have empathy. It's such an interesting flip from this nice to have to an essential.
And I guess you could argue that small business more than anyone could empathize even more directly, because it's sort of it's more than ever it's one person to another versus say a big corporation where you still have that friction, right, between upper management to who's deciding the strategy versus execution. So this is probably another way where small businesses can differentiate.
That's super true. And especially right now, I think transparency is going to be a little more commonplace. I think there was already businesses who were really great at that. Like Buffer is my favorite example. If you've read their blog, I mean,
they post the salaries online.
They share everything that they do internally, what works and what doesn't. And now I think there's going to be a lot more shifting towards transparency, because we've got so many disruptions in our day-to-day and our business policies and everything, especially if you're an e-commerce site. It's what products are available, when are they going to be shipped, who's around to respond to your messages, and whether you're a one-person shop and you're not able to get to your studio and you are in the process of moving things and being able to work from shelter in place, or you've got a team of 5 and you had to furlough 3 of them. That sort of where there might have been shame around that, if it was just your company having this problem and you want to paint a good picture and you don't want that negative PR, you might not have said that. But right now it's like, hey, I'm struggling. You're struggling too? Cool. Let me tell you how we're struggling and how we're going around it. And so, if you're like a one or 2 or 3 people operation, there's a lot of sharing that's going to start to happen if it hasn't already.
So it's essentially, I mean, if I try to rephrase that, it's like the situation has given businesses permission to be vulnerable.
Yeah, very much so. I think it takes away this idea that you can't be at fault. You can't have these issues. We're all dealing with them.
I mean, this is a really big topic. I'm just trying to hold myself from getting into it, but one of my favorite Jeff Bezos quotes is that every overnight success I've ever read took 10 years. And I mean, he's a very complicated guy, so let's just focus on that quote, right? I don't want to be
let's not focus on the man,
endorsement for Jeff Bezos, but I think that quote has a lot of truth in it, because I think, at least before now, we're talking about being vulnerable. People always talk about their success, and that has this very, very, I think, a demoralizing impact on anybody listening in, where they feel like, wow, that was so easy. This person just got to I don't know, $1 million revenue in a year. And he just did this, and this. And and when you talk to these people, that's not really what happened. They made probably 50 different mistakes. They probably ate ramen for, I don't know, weeks because they couldn't afford anything else. And there's so much more that's going on behind that success story. And now I guess maybe we're going to have more honest conversations about how you actually build a successful business, because it's not all roses.
I hope so. It's making me laugh. All the emails, all the content that you get that's how to handle this crisis, how to navigate it. And no one knows. It drives me crazy when people come to it like, we're the experts, we know all this stuff. No, you don't. Like, we're all learning this together. And so, yeah, I mean, for me as a consumer, I welcome that level of transparency and just honesty that, like, yep, it's a struggle. But the more that you bring that out, the more people are going to want to help.
That's true.
By supporting you.
That's true.
And again, going back to like smaller businesses, I mean, think about all the restaurants right now that are getting gift cards. Mm-hmm. You're going to get way more of people buying gift cards, people getting your takeout dinners or whatever you're offering. If you reach out and you say, hey, like, we had to make some tough decisions. We had to let go of people. We had to furlough people. We want to remain open. Then that means you want to help, versus the one who's like, oh, business is fine. You're like, all right, well, then I guess I'll give my money elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Like, did you know, I was just checking out some Google Trends information before our chat, and more people are searching for how can I help on Google now than they were from Hurricane Harvey or from the wildfires in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, it's super peaked in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially the gift card situation is definitely huge, because I know Shopify, for instance, they made it available on all their plans because, we were talking about this a little bit earlier about how each e-commerce company has different issues. And you could be a company that just because of all the lockdowns, you can't get product in. So then you have nothing to sell. So then the only thing you can do is gift cards. But something interesting could be there's a lot of creativity coming out right now as well. So, right, it's like, okay, you've got the gift cards, that's great. People can help. But I'm seeing a lot of innovation on the product side where, I had a guest a few weeks ago. I think I've brought this up quite a few times because I'm so impressed. But these guys do these diaries, the printed diaries. And then they realized, you know what, everyone's stuck at home, so why don't we just make these pads which people can doodle in, so parents can have things to do with their kids and, artists. So it wasn't really changing the product fundamentally in terms of the raw material, but they're just really addressing a need. And now people are like, yes, I can help you, and you're kind of helping me. It's really how the market works, right?
Oh my gosh, I could go on and on about innovation. I was probably annoying to work with the first few weeks that we were stuck at home, because I was more excited than scared, just because there's so much crazy potential right now, and we're all being forced to change. So yeah, the innovation has been wild. And if businesses aren't pivoting, if they're not able to figure some new strategies and some new plans out, they're going to have problems. Yeah, figure shit out. My favorite innovation remains actually the pizza kits idea, which I think has been catching on recently through a lot of the pizza chains. No, that some pizza shops are, rather than just selling you a made pizza for kids, they're giving you dough and sauce and cheese in a box. I love that. And here's the crazy thing is, any pizza shop could have been doing that at any time. They have all the materials already. It's a great marketing idea for giving kids an activity to do.
So it's a bit like Blue Apron, right? Except it's just with pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but like how freaking genius is that?
I know.
Because it doesn't cost them anything more. It actually saves them time because you're not making the pizza. Yeah. And now, if you have the option between a couple different pizza shops near you, and you have kids and you need stuff for them to do, like, guess what shop you're going to be going to from now until you are no longer stuck at home. I think that's truly genius. It's so interesting the way in which businesses have been forced to innovate in so many ways, whether it's the actual products themselves, whether it's the service and how that product is delivered or shared.
And here's the thing, right? So we're talking, about marketing, and this is sort of a very, I think, a forgotten fact about marketing, that what you just talked about, sort of the innovation in the product, is also marketing. It gets people to talk about you. It gets people to connect with you. So it's not like, oh, but that's not marketing. Well, it is.
It is.
Right? Like I've even seen like an example with pricing being good marketing, where I think it was like this Icelandic supermarket, if I'm not wrong, where you know what happened, where people were just overbuying hand sanitizers and just like buying so much that there wasn't enough for anyone else.
Yeah.
What these guys did was just so smart, because you know how in supermarkets, when you buy, you can buy one, but if you buy two, you get a discount. You buy three, you get a little bit more of a discount. They flipped that. So they made it like a minus thing. So if you buy, so they had something like, if you buy one hand sanitizer, it's, I don't know, $2. But if you buy two, it's 95.
That's awesome, because that in and of itself is just, publicity.
Right, and people were just taking photos of this and posting it, and they were thinking, wow, this is like really smart. I mean, we're talking about it right now. It's a supermarket.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I mean, it clearly like really hit a nerve, right? So, yeah, so I guess that. It's like, okay, if innovation is really, but the thing is, like, innovation's hard, right? It's like, it's always like you, like, at least say we go back to the clients that you guys are working with, right? So is there some kind of like a checklist or like things or advice that you talk to them, not particularly about innovation, but like just helping them sort of get ready with their marketing? Like what kind of advice are you giving these guys right now?
The first thing that we did, looking back at, I guess this was late March at this time, once we realized, oh, this is a big thing and it's going to affect people in a big way. For all of our clients, we just kind of took a pause on what we were doing, and we brainstormed a lot of creative strategies for them and different directions that they could take. And, even though we focus on SEO, so when I say we, I just mean my little team. But, we started to look at, not just things that will relate to your website and your rankings, but more broadly, like how do you bring in some of that traffic, because we know that people are going to be spending way more time online than they have been. We know that they're going to be shopping online way more than they have been. So how do you make sure that you are there, whether it's, for the transaction, whether it's for the activity, or whatever it is. And so, so it wasn't a checklist, because as we've talked about, like every business is just so different. What advice we give our clothing retailer is not going to be the same as the advice we give our, a cultural attraction. But so that's why we wanted to give it that personalized touch, like, hey, for your business in specific, here's some ideas that you could be taking. And some of them were, a bit more commonplace, for example, virtual tours, or walking tours, and partnerships with influencers as a way to get views. And then some were a bit more specific as far as like thinking about ways that they could resell or repackage or remarket their products to work from home. And then for all of our partners, obviously we're recommending, improving and changing your content strategy so it's focused on the way people are searching now, and making sure that you're hitting that at home. Oh my God, it's a huge one.
Yeah. I mean that's, I would say, almost the crux of SEO, right? Essentially writing to your audience, connecting with them, and knowing what they're actually looking for. We've been talking pretty much this whole time so far about how people have fundamentally changed. You just talked about how the search habits have changed in terms of like, how can I help is now a very prominent message. So let's get into that, because I think it's really like a nice way of bringing everything which we've talked about so far, and essentially being authentic, being empathetic, really communicating, being vulnerable. How would I go about sort of bringing that into some kind of content strategy? And right now, I think it's better if we speak to the people who haven't thought about this very seriously, because I think anyone who would probably have already adjusted. But say someone's just been selling online, maybe they've done a few paid marketing channels and it's been going fine, but now it's all drying up. How should they think about this?
Yeah, and paid is its own thing, and I know they're having their own issues right now. Well, for those people, for anybody who is struggling with paid right now, I mean, focusing on your organic search results, that is the move, because that's the free traffic. So if you're trying to save money, that's where you need to be. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we're at this point where I can't imagine any company keeping the same strategy that they had in place in January for the year. So I'd say if you haven't already scrapped all of your ideas,
change it now.
Change it now if you haven't. I can't even imagine. Yeah, and so for content, I mean, that's a huge area where for a lot, any of our partners where we are doing more long form content, be it blogs, evergreen content, webinars, things like that, they're all being changed. They're all being rethought. They're being, if we have ongoing lists of content or calendars planned out for weeks or months, they're getting reprioritized, and we're focusing on what's going to help people right now. And I think the longer that we are in this place, in this shelter in place, working from home sort of situation, we'll start to see more clear patterns in buying. For instance, for things that might not be as easy to purchase right now, I think you'll see data related to the research component of that start to rise. For example, like thinking of myself as a consumer right now, I love working on home projects, but I never have any time to. Well, guess what? I have so much time now. So I've spent a lot of money recently on home decor stuff. But I can't have a contractor in my house right now, right? So, one part of that habit is, doing these searches that are much farther down the funnel, right? I already know which brands that I want to shop from, or I'm doing high level searches where I know what the product is already, and I'm just looking for that transaction. But then I think down the line, we're going to start to see more top of funnel queries. Again, right now is actually, it sucks for anybody who doesn't have the discretionary income or the budget to be able to attribute to SEO at this time, because, man, this is the moment to be there.
But let's just define this for the audience, because when you're talking about top of the funnel, you're essentially saying these are not ones who are looking to buy right now, but they are just sort of getting to know your brand. So it's more of like, probably even if you can't sell now, I guess what you're trying to say here is that, or what you're saying here is that get your brand out there, because it's still, people are researching you, and when they can buy it, then you're in the perfect place to get that sale.
Absolutely. Yep. So it's super interesting, right? Because usually there's this struggle between trying to prioritize, the types of content topics that will get you closer to the funnel, closer to the sale, right? If it's somebody, for example, in the decision buying or in the decision making phase of their funnel, where they're like, all right, we have these two brands, or I have these two products, I'm not sure which one to buy. Maybe they're searching for a keyword with verses, or maybe they're looking for something with reviews. How do you balance that and content creation for those queries to, queries related to your actual product, a copy block on your best-selling e-commerce page, for example, versus something that is much more high level that's probably not going to convert, at least not in the traditional last click attribution model, right? That's just focused on brand awareness. But now I think we have a little more structure, and I think it's a little easier now to figure out how to prioritize that based on all of the external factors that are happening right now. Well, what can you sell? That's what you prioritize, right? And if you can't sell anything, I'm sorry, that's terrible. But if you can't sell anything, then, well, are you pivoting your products or services to be able to sell something? Hopefully you are. And if so, then that's the thing that you focus on building your content around. And if you can't do that, well, then, your goals are going to change, so that rather than trying to sell, you're going to be trying to, focus on other micro conversions. So you might be focused on
build your email list, maybe
building your email list, building your social media followings, video plays online, all of those things. And so if those become your new KPIs, then you're absolutely going to be focused on more top of funnel type of searches. And I think right now there's actually a pretty sharp peak in how-to queries, which makes perfect sense because people have to figure out how to do a lot of stuff that they weren't doing before.
And that's great. And I mean, like I was kind of getting to that with the content question, right? Because I'm just going to link that with what we said before we started the podcast about how it's a lot of like back to basics. But essentially, it seems like what you're saying with the SEO is that most of the queries are top of the funnel because people have so much more time and they're looking for research and things like that. And if you have a product, then I guess if you've been selling that for some time, you probably are a subject matter expert. So you can attract that traffic with some really great top of the funnel content.
Absolutely.
And then hopefully convert them.
Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, I would say, as far as like advice goes to anybody who hasn't spent a lot of time on their on a content strategy, I'd be focusing on two places. I would be focusing on your e-commerce pages. For anybody who hasn't, using copy blocks or making sure that the copy on those pages is optimized. And by that we mean it's very clear what that category is. It's very clear what is being sold. You have a lot of content that's supporting that on those pages. If you're still able to sell a widget, then make sure that the page for the widgets is very well optimized. I'd say that is, and if you're in a position to be able to sell and make money, then that's probably going to be.
What does an optimized page look like? So for those of us who are thinking, I mean, that makes sense. If I've got a product page, I need to optimize it. I think, there's some pretty generic advice out there, like make sure your photos are really good. If you've got reviews, stick them on there. Make sure the descriptions are good because it's going to get some SEO traffic and people can read them. Beyond that, is there anything else that sort of when you review clients' pages, for instance, that really strike out that, oh my God, like not another one, right? Like what are those like pet peeves?
Not another one. Yeah. Nah, there's no pet peeves. There's just a lot of common issues of under optimization for a lot of partners, especially if you haven't spent a lot of time on your SEO or you don't have anybody, with that kind of knowledge in house. So I'd say the product pages usually don't give as much TLC to, just because of the nature of them. I mean, they are fundamentally going to have less SEO equity than other pages on your site. So they're not going to rank as well. They're not going to bring in as much traffic. And anyway, the number of people searching for a specific product is going to pale in comparison to people searching for a type of product. So, so rather than focusing on the product pages,
SEO equity, that's a great one.
Yeah, equity. Yes, it's a very kind of broad concept. But the concept is that your homepage typically for most sites will have the most kind of equity, and that equity flows through the links that you have on your site. And so, the pages that are in the best sort of position to be performing well and bringing in more traffic are those primary category and subcategory pages that you're linking to. Either, typically they'll be included obviously in the navigation. You might include them in the footer. You might also include links on the homepage itself. But those are the pages. If you're still able to make money from those things, I'd focus on them. And especially, I think bigger retailers are definitely doing a good job of promoting the products that people want right now and are using right now, whether it's, athleisure wear and, lounge wear.
Right, like everyday
anything you can do at home.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And so coming back to that, like what you said about the homepage, I think that's critical because when you're talking about equity, that's probably the most important page on your site. And then that means that people should be, if you're talking about optimization, they should be looking at their existing sales and going and doing maybe like a regular review to see that am I featuring the right content on my homepage compared to right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say if you've got, hero banners, if you have carousels, if you have blocks of space in any way to be able to link to other categories, and you haven't updated those to be to, the more relevant products for people right now, and that's a very easy first step. Um,
Yes.
and there's a lot of e-commerce companies out there that do not link well at all to their content, to the blog. They treat it almost like a separate site. And for some it is if it's on a subdomain.
Right.
But, a lot of sites make the mistake of they just have a link to it in the footer and they treat it as its own separate thing. And they don't make it easy and apparent for customers to see it. And so, not only does that devalue it in the customer's eyes, because what's the chance that they're scrolling down to your footer and clicking on an icon to your blog?
Exactly.
Very poor. But then that also translates to how Google sees it. If you were linking,
Like
strategically,
yeah.
If you're linking very strategically to new posts, if on the homepage you're saying, and here's this new piece that we wrote about, all the shows on Netflix that you should be watching right now while you're stuck at home, and then you get to your category pages and you sell men's dress shirts and you wrote a piece on, hey, now you have your dress shirt, here's how to tie a tie or whatever it is, strategically promoting your content on your own site tells Google that we value this content. We think our customers will value this content, and that will absolutely reflect in rankings because of how that equity is flowing.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to that, the blog post. So obviously, like you said, make it prominent on your homepage. But I'm just going back to the discussion we had about top level content, where people are searching how to do this, how to do that. And then we talked about like how that's top of the funnel. Are there any suggestions that you have where you use the blog post strategically to link back to your e-commerce site? So maybe, for instance, maybe that's something people should be doing more of as well?
Absolutely, but not too much. There's a balance.
Right. So what does that look like? What does that balance look like?
Absolutely. So yeah, the easy rule of thumb that you can use is one link per 100 words. So if you're linking to way too many things, you might get a little link happy. That can come across as spammy, and that can kind of hurt your quality score for that page, which can impact your rankings. So, I mean, the way I see it is always add a link where appropriate, where you would actually want somebody to leave the page, is because that's, essentially what you're offering them anyway. But yes, to answer your question, linking back and forth between all the content on your site, whether it's product to product, product to category, product to blog, and blog back to product or category, that's huge. And it can be a big undertaking. We actually just did 2 projects like that for 2 of our customers, where we essentially, went through their whole site and identified areas where, one, where their internal links were broken or outdated, is something that often needs to be fixed. But then 2, areas where you should be adding them, where there's opportunity.
Right. And I guess, as a small business owner, you're probably thinking, well, that sounds great, but I don't really have time for that. But clearly prioritization is your answer there, right? So maybe even if you've got 100 blog posts, maybe you just figure out the top 5 that are getting the most traffic, and then you just do some links there and you see how that goes.
Yes, that's exactly what I would recommend, actually. Just doing off a little bit at a time. Yep.
Yeah. So, coming back to this whole the link building topic, we talked about how linking your e-commerce page to your content or your blog makes sense, and then vice versa. The overall theme here is that it's very difficult to get external links, but it's very easy to do your internal links. So why would you not do that when that's an easy +1 to your Google SEO score?
Absolutely. Yeah. Internal links are such a huge ranking factor. Yeah.
Is there?
But that is part of the reason is it can be time consuming. And certainly, I mean,
Jess, come on. This must be a pet peeve. You said you don't have any pet peeves. This must be one of them.
My pet peeve is lack of implementation, which is something that all SEOs struggle with. And we can get into that as we talk more about, at Trinity and the workarounds that we have found for that. But no, linking is a challenge. And I would say, for anyone who has an e-commerce site, who might be struggling with this, I think the first place to look is at the templates that you're using and the designs that you're using, and make sure that your top navigation does include all the important pages that you want to drive traffic to, and make sure that you're using breadcrumb links. That is a super easy one, and more difficult can be your e-commerce navigation and how it's set up. That's kind of an advanced topic, because it can create a whole host of different issues, whether it's duplicate content, whether it's indexation, whether it's creating index bloat and hurting your crawl budget. But poke around your website is what I would say to anybody listening who wants to spend some time on their links. Looking at category and subcategory pages and the navigation that you have on those pages, is it easy for people to find their way back one layer, two layers, and then back to the home page from whatever page they're on? There are a lot of platforms where the way that they're set up out of the box, they don't actually link to the same links that you have in your top navigation. And that's creating, that's limiting your ranking potential across.
Have you found a particular platform that's very good at SEO out of the box that you think they do very well that people can have a look at?
Well, every platform has its pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses. We do partner with Ecommerce and Shopify. Those are usually pretty friendly, and we usually work with mid-size to larger scale retailers. So those do work really well. For any business, we always recommend WordPress. That is super SEO friendly, and especially either if you are doing this all yourself, it's very user friendly for people who are not as technically inclined. And then it's also has low barriers to entry for anybody you might hire. So you have a much better chance of somebody, if you were working with somebody to do SEO, for example, they're going to be able to get into WordPress and do a lot of this stuff for you, versus if you were on, I don't know, what's a good example, like an Oracle or
But say someone's on Shopify. I know that Shopify has their own sort of blog component. Would you say even with that, like someone could just do the blog on WordPress and then do the sales on Shopify, or would you just say do the blog on Shopify too? Like what?
Yeah, you could. I think I'd have to do a little more research into the Shopify blog component. Any of our partners who have migrated to Shopify have done exactly what you said. They use the two different platforms, and WordPress goes alongside it.
Yeah, because the way Google's, if you use a different platform, you would do blog.mycompany.com versus mycompany.com/blog, right? And that's very different, right, from an SEO perspective. So have you found
those
that
two? Yeah, those two are very different. However, it's not necessarily rule-based depending on the platform that you use. Gets a little more complicated than that. That is something for developers to work out.
Sure. Yeah, I was just getting into it from an SEO point of view because, for instance, if I were running two platforms like Shopify and I had my blog on WordPress, then it would be two different subdomains. And like from what I recall, Google sees it as two completely separate websites because it's a subdomain.
Yeah.
But from what it sounds like, you can make it work, right? Like it doesn't really matter that much.
You can definitely make it work. Yeah, that's one of those things that we come into a lot. And yes, the best practice is certainly to use subfolders or subdirectories rather than a subdomain. you know, mywebsite.com/blog rather than blog.mywebsite, because Google does treat them differently and it doesn't carry the same weight. So it does limit your ability to rank. You know, and there's studies out there that have kind of shown if, you know, businesses that have migrated to a subdomain saw a lot of improvement from there. So yeah, if you have the ability to choose one over the other, it is much better to keep it on the same domain. That said, that's not possible for a lot of partners for a lot of different reasons. Some of them just don't have the ability to migrate at that time. Others, it's a platform issue, and the way that WordPress or another CMS works with their platform. So that's not to say that it can't work and it can't bring in traffic, because it absolutely can.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the technical side, I feel like SEO can get very, very complicated very quickly, right? Like it's almost like you when you read the 101 stuff, it's like, yeah, make some great content, put it on something like WordPress or a blog, and people will come. But then you start getting into it. Like, not to put you on the spot, but one of the things I've read is that, you know, for instance, on a blog post, if you added a date, that makes Google sort of prioritize that more, because essentially, like, if you've got the same content that was written more recently than something 6 months ago, Google tends to favor that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but is there anything else like that you've seen in all the years you've been working with SEO that people sort of like these little tips on things that can help get your ranking a little bit better?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, the dates is a weird one. It's definitely an example where a lot of SEOs will have different opinions about whether or not you're including and that could be whether you're including the date in the URL versus whether you're just mentioning it in the actual copy. For Trinity, we typically recommend, if you can have an evergreen URL structure, then do that. But for anybody listening, if you
so
have
define an evergreen URL structure for someone who's not familiar with that.
Oh, it's just something that doesn't include the date as part of the permalink. So, you know, something that is user friendly and descriptive, but, you know, under 150 characters, easy to read and understand. But, you know, on the flip side of that, if you have dates in your URLs, do not just go and change them because that would be a migration, and that could, if handled improperly, could tank your traffic and rankings.
I mean, especially because that's an easy one to solve, right? Like I've seen quite a few companies who say, oh, like with the hugely successful 2019 list, we've decided to do a 2020 list with even more tips. And so there's nothing wrong with keeping your old list with the same URL.
There's nothing wrong with
don't mess with your URL. Like if you've gone
don't mess with the URLs. Oh, if that could be the one takeaway, yes. Because when you talk about SEO, that is where the value is attributed. You know, the value is attributed to a very specific URL. And, you know, for people who aren't as technically inclined, you know, you might not realize the small discrepancies in, you know, having mixed case URLs mixed case characters in your URLs versus all lowercase, or having a trailing slash at the end of your URL versus not. Users don't notice that stuff, but as SEOs, we have to, because Google sees those as two completely different pages. They are completely different. They might have the exact same content on them, and that becomes its own issue, but they're completely 100% different.
Right. So is there some kind of some tool available? You know, like I think many listeners out there are already familiar with the idea of like doing paid speed tests. So they've all got their favorite tools to put in their website and see how long it takes to load and blah, blah, blah. I think this is pretty mainstream, but is there something like that which is free or easy to access on the SEO side, which would tell you like, hey, like these are some areas that you need to really look at?
Yeah, well, here I'll plug us instead, because Trinity does do complimentary audits, and so that's probably the easiest thing to do. Yeah, for anybody who reaches out, you know, and is interested in seeing what's going on with my site, what we do is we'll generate, we'll do a crawl and generate a prioritized list of whole bunch of issues that are discovered through that crawl. Now it is, pretty automated in the way that it's generated. And so like a lot of tools out there, tools like a Bright Edge come to mind, where people will pay thousands of dollars per month for this tool, and it has the same issues as a lot of other tools, where you have to take every recommendation with a grain of salt, because something that's a problem on one domain is not a problem on another.
Right.
Or for example, like I'm thinking right now, like one of our partners, we just did a diagnostic crawl for, and we came across the issue where, a lot of your title tags are too long, which is a very fundamental kind of basic issue.
Mm-hmm.
But, the pages that the title tags were too long on were parametered URLs. They were queries that they were handled in Search Console to not be indexed. So it's actually not an issue, but you have to have that knowledge to know. Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, so it can be tough. But anyway, for the complementary audits that we do, we'll not only generate the report for you, but then we'll hop on the call and kind of walk through and explain some of those things. So that's what I'll say as far as an audit service. There's plenty of other like free audits that you can find online, but it always kind of comes down to that same issue,
Right.
as it's just going to tell you what it sees, and it may or may not actually be a problem.
I guess when you do these kind of audits, even if you don't know about SEO, hopefully whoever receives these reports will have something which lets them ask better questions from a professional, right? So
Absolutely.
Instead of saying, "Oh, my SEO sucks," you could say, "Look, I've got this report that says that these title tags are too long. What do you think?" And then that's something which I guess any professional could have a quick look at and be like, "You know what, you're fine," or "Yeah, that's actually a big problem. You should go and fix that."
Exactly. And if it's something like title tags, or something like your header tags, that is something that anybody who's kind of dug into a CMS system can be able to fix on their own. Just takes some common sense.
Yeah. So it seems like we've covered a lot of ground because we
I just realized, I'm like, we haven't mentioned coronavirus in at least 5 minutes.
Thank God.
But that was part of the goal, and that's exactly what you said, right? Is like, we're getting fatigued. That's actually to talk about content and thinking about things that are evergreen. Mm-hmm. That's something that I am challenging a lot of my partners to think about when it comes to content, is balancing this line between creating content that is useful at this time, mm-hmm. and is empathetic to this time, mm-hmm. without specifically naming it. And I say that from a practical standpoint, because oftentimes you don't have a team that's so on it that they're going to remember in 2 years from now to go back and edit that blog post and remove the term coronavirus so it sounds up to date, because it's still bringing in traffic and the query is still relevant.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of really have to toe the line a little bit there. Or I guess if you're going to go into it, you go all in on this one piece, and then
exactly.
you just
exactly.
Right, that makes a lot of sense.
Super interesting for SEOs, looking at the keyword research portion of it, because it is all dependent on search demand, and it's all dependent on these tools that we use, and the queries that they are capturing. And so, in March, when we were trying to figure out what do people talk about right now, well, there wasn't a lot of keywords that used the term coronavirus or COVID-19 mm-hmm. related to anything other than the news and it actually has a virus, and what are the symptoms and all this stuff.
And I'm pretty
people weren't
sure
asking more creative.
And I'm pretty sure that's a keyword that Google is policing quite actively, because so much fake. Like I know that on YouTube, if you search anything to do with COVID-19 or coronavirus, they immediately pop up this thing with the WHO guidelines, so that they're sort of like being very, because I think they've gotten a lot of flack right now for having a lot of false information. So maybe it's not strategic to just go for those keywords at all anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I would certainly not focus on I had somebody ask me about like, well, what if we focus on, coronavirus in, what their state was? And I said, I mean, bless you. If you are able to rank for that, you'll get a lot of traffic for one day. And then beyond that, you'll have to keep it up, because the outlets that are going to be ranking for those type of newsworthy queries are like the CNNs and MSNBCs.
Yes.
And it's these pages that can keep up with live updates like on the minute.
Yeah.
Because what's the point of me looking at an article about coronavirus that came out 2 weeks ago? The world is completely different now.
Yeah. So, I mean, since you're talking about this has really reminded me of this thing which I was really sort of dying to ask you. Because when you're talking about coronavirus as a keyword, what you're alluding to there is picking a keyword with very high search volume, right? And so that's why it's so attractive for people, because they want to really rank for something which they know a lot of eyeballs are coming through. But I think, a lot of folks have almost the opposite problem, where when you've got a product that maybe it's sort of low on the awareness scale, or like people aren't actively searching for that product, you've almost got a different challenge where the content you need to write is not really about your product, but it's on sort of like related issues that maybe would be applicable to yours, and then you educate the customer that, oh, you know what, if I've invented this new way of, I don't know, killing mosquitoes, maybe I can't talk about my product right now in content because no one's searching for it, but I guess a lot of people are searching for how to kill mosquitoes. How do you deal with that with clients much? Like, what kind of advice do you have for people in that situation?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's one that comes up occasionally, because on one hand, there's nothing new under the sun, and on the other hand, 1,000%. One example that I love to use is think about subscription boxes, right? If we were to do some keyword research today on subscription boxes, there'd be thousands of keywords with different modifiers and permutations of different queries that people are searching for. And those main keywords, if people just looking for monthly subscription boxes, have got to be in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, right? But before the first subscription box was made, that wasn't a keyword. Literally no people were searching for it. So yeah, there's absolutely instances where over time you can generate demand for something that wasn't there before. We've had that with partners. The example that comes to mind for me is when working with Crayola. I think it was last year, they launched a campaign they called CIY. Like Crayola it yourself, do it yourself for Crayola. And that was a tough point, because at that time we were like, we understand from a branding standpoint that you want to do this, and from a marketing standpoint that makes perfect sense. From an SEO standpoint, nobody knows what CIY is. No one's searching for that. But there's so much search demand for DIY. Like, are you kidding? That's a gold mine of potential search demand to tap into. And for someone like Crayola that has the brand authority, they would easily be able to capture a lot of that. And so it's really hard for us sitting back to be like, if they just would call it DIY instead and swallow that pill, they'd take off. They'd do so well. However, it's Crayola and they have that power. And so it was maybe a little more of an uphill climb, but now there is search demand for CIY. Is a product that they created, and over time, we'll get a lot of demand from. So for me, I would say it very much depends on what business it is that's launching that.
So, I mean, I guess my question was more of not in creating the demand for that keyword, because if you're as big as Crayola, that's an option that you have.
And you're able to create it,
does
right?
Not have that option, I think.
Yeah. So if you're not, I would say stick to the golden rules of marketing, which is don't talk about your product, talk about the issue that your consumer has and how you can fix it.
That is great.
So exactly, like you're with killing the mosquitoes, right? You might have the mosquito killer, and people aren't looking for the mosquito killer, but they are looking at how the heck do I get rid of mosquitoes?
Right.
In this case, you can pop up and you can tell them, well, you can do this, 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 or you can buy my product. And the more, this is especially an area where topical authority is going to be key if you are the type of business that doesn't have that kind of power behind you. You got to create it.
I love that. So don't talk about the product. Talk about the product, the problem you're solving. Is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Talk about the consumer's issue.
Right.
Figure out what issues the consumers are having through keyword research. Figure out what questions they're asking, and then answer them. And the more you do that, both on your site and hopefully also through external PR opportunities and guest posting and backlinking opportunities and all of that stuff, the more you will be understood as a resource in that space. And so the more likely it is that you will rank for the mosquito killer product or whatever the equivalent is.
No, and I think that's like coming back to what we talked about, like coming back to basics. It seems like most of these sort of esoteric or like all these questions that you might have on how you solve this or this or this, they're sort of like these basic rule of thumb of marketing that you can always keep coming back to. Speak in the voice of your customer, be authentic, make sure you're speaking about the problem and not just pitching your product, things like that.
It's 1,000% back to basics. It's so funny to me that in times like this, customers are always asking, what do I do now? And it's so funny because it doesn't matter the day, it doesn't matter the issue. It's always you go back to the thing that we've been talking about this whole time. As marketers, part of our job is packaging it differently to make the person feel better, like there is something new to it, and there isn't. Like I've had a lot of customers, when the coronavirus stuff first started popping up and becoming more prevalent, they asked, what do we do now? What is our strategy? How does this change your recommendations? And internally we're like, it doesn't. Recommendations are exactly the same. That doesn't change.
Right.
Just the tactics might, and
so
when we talk about like focusing on different content, but the goal is still focus on content.
So this is a really good point to like what would your summary of like the 3 key takeaways for people listening in? Like we've talked about so much, so
I know we have
hard pressed to pick a few.
It is hard to pick a few. Oh man, I would say first and foremost, focus on how much you are communicating with your customers externally. More than anything, making sure that you have this really open line of communication with them, and that may be very different to how you were operating before. But using the example of like, your website right now, like, should not look at all like it did a couple of months ago. You should have banners up on every page to let people know that you're open for business,
right.
And links to more information about how your business has been impacted by the coronavirus and answers to people's questions. You should be putting out content regularly into the world. That was always the case, but like now more than ever, because people, the second that somebody, especially if they're new to your site, is going to be wondering, are you even open? What's the deal here?
Yeah.
What do I do to talk to you? So talking with customers just becomes way more prevalent. I am also saying one big takeaway is when you're thinking about planning, especially in e-commerce, start planning your holiday season now. In SEO, it's always one of those issues where the changes that you make on your website today are not going to help or hurt your rankings. Well, I won't say hurt. They're not going to help your rankings until at least a couple of weeks to a couple of months down the line, because Google has to recrawl those pages. They have to understand the changes and what that means, and they have to reevaluate your positioning compared to these other sites. And yeah, it's all done from an algorithm, but it does still take time. And so it's always been best practice from an SEO standpoint to prepare your web pages for holiday and make sure that they are visible to Google and able to rank well, months in advance. And so this year, who knows what our holidays are going to look like. And so if you're a traditional e-commerce store and you are focused on, and December is traditionally a really good month for you, start planning now what that might look like, because if it's not going to be a good month for you, you're going to need to come up with another plan. And if you're banking on it being a good month for you, you really need to make sure that it's a good month. That's what I would say. Go ahead.
No, I was just, I think that's really good advice. Especially with the fact that whatever you do in SEO, it takes months or, weeks, depending on how big you are. So that's
absolutely.
So how can, we again, you mentioned the diagnostic that you guys do. I'm sure we haven't even scratched the surface of SEO, right? So is there any way that you'd like people to get in touch with you if they've got more questions?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Please do. Well, I'll start with our website is trinity.one rather than .com. So that's where you can find information about us. If you have any questions related to SEO, please feel free to reach out to me directly. It's jlister@trinity.one is my email. Otherwise, I'd say, we're super glad to do any sort of an audit. We're offering free strategy sessions for businesses, especially those who have been impacted right now. I know it can be hard to find the marketing budget, but I also see where it's a total necessity at this point. So we recently made some changes to the way that we're working with our agencies, with our agency partners, and we're offering no commitment, no contract related partnerships now, just to make it a lot easier and lower those barriers to entry, because we recognize that there's a lot of people who are confused and stuck and need support, but might not be in the position to sign on for 6 months or a year. So yeah, that's kind of something that we're offering. And then just to clarify, I'm focused on SEO as the SEO director, but we do also do platform redesigns and builds with Shopify and BigCommerce, obviously, as our partners. But we'll work with any platform. And we also do UX and conversion optimization and email marketing and journeys as well. So I just scratched a little part of everything that we do, but yeah, we love to be able to help in any way that we can right now, just like everybody else.
Thank you so much, Jessica. It's been a pleasure having you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love chatting today.
Yeah, you too.